Michelle's story is inspirational, and it's an extraordinary tale, which of course she's about to relate for us. But before I do so, let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. Michelle is a professor. She's a professor of literature, I suppose, because she's a scholar of comparative literature, and she's president of the Mayapple Center for the Arts and Humanities. And most erudite young lady, if I may say so, and she's got extraordinary number of qualifications and amazing dissertations. I'm barely able to understand the titles, let alone read them. So, Michelle, welcome to What Doctors Don't Tell You webinar.
Brian, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Thank you. Well, as I say, Michelle's story is the main feature of the November issue. And I think we were just so struck by the story when we heard about it, and of course then went on to read her superb book of actually what happened to her. In a nutshell, and Michelle's going to tell the story far better than me, she developed Lyme disease. Now, we all know Lyme disease has become an absolute epidemic in particularly Northern Europe and northern climes, I suppose, Canada and North America generally. And it's become an epidemic, and there's been few solutions offered by conventional medicine other than high-dose antibiotics at the early stage. If it's not caught at that point, there seems to be almost nothing that conventional medicine can offer, which means that for some, the disease, which of course is a bacterial infection from a tick bite, will progress, and your life will become worse and worse, and you'll become debilitated in some cases, a dreadful fate. But it was one that Michelle was not going to accept. And what she came up with was the most extraordinary solution, which, and here we see her now, fit and well before us. And before she had this therapy, she was a bedridden lady. And here she is now well and to tell her tale. Michelle, let's start. I mean, we're going back here a bit when the infection started, was it? Was it, I believe, around about 2012, so 10 years ago?
Yes, that's right.
And do you remember actually being bitten?
So I had discovered one tick embedded in my flesh, right. But when that one was tested, it came out negative. And then that's the tricky thing with Lyme, is that there are all of these false negatives and you never really know.
Yeah.
But I had symptoms even before 2012, as early as 2010, 11. And so when I finally did get the diagnosis, just because I had an array of symptoms that were terrifying without finding a tick bite, and I did get the diagnosis finally in 2012. The Lyme specialist said that it was already quite chronic in my body because certain blood tests that they can do to detect it were so low, and my white blood cell counts were rock bottom. So it's like this is not a new infection, this is an old infection. So that's the other tricky thing, Brian, is that with ticks, you don't always get that classic erythema migrans bullseye rash. Right. So not having had that, not having found probably the original tick, which is not hard to do because they're minuscule, left me with these mysterious things happening in my body without really knowing why.
And I think you raise a very good point here, which was that the tests themselves are often inadequate and hopelessly imprecise. And and I don't think even 10 years on, these tests have really improved very much. So that's the first obstacle, isn't it? Because if you can't get an actual positive diagnosis, as you said, if you get a false negative, then of course you carry on with your life and you don't do anything at all about it until it is then too late. I mean, are you aware of any tests that you could say you actually do deliver the evidence that you need?
Well, there are a variety of tests out there, and there are different bands on these tests. And so, they say that, for example, the Western blot test is fairly reliable. And then if you see an ILADS doctor, that's this association of Lyme doctors. Those specialists tend to have access to better testing and more specialized tests. But
Okay.
if you, at the time that I was doing it, and I just went through my general practitioner, there
Yeah.
was, sort of the standard Lyme test, and the name of it is failing me at the moment. That it can be famously unreliable.
Right. And I mean, you say these Lyme specialists. I mean, are there many of them around, or?
In the United States, because there are now, the CDC reports are now over 400,000 cases a year, and that's a conservative estimate.
Wow.
There are many Lyme specialists, especially in New England,
Yeah.
and New York, where I am,
Yeah.
but really all over the country now there have been cases reported. So
Mm.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that's spread to in terms of the Lyme doctors rather than the Lyme disease, whether there are Lyme specialists elsewhere around the world. I guess they are starting to crop up now, but it's a good idea, isn't it, for people to check that out first of all, see if they can find a Lyme specialist if they do suspect an infection. Just before we carry on, should just say Molly, our excellent assistant here, is fielding questions. She'll be making a note of questions. So I think somewhere there's a bar where you can start typing in your questions as we go. If an idea pops into your head, do feel free to ask it, and Michelle will try to answer it towards the end of this talk. So anyway, so in a sense, your diagnosis came too late for any conventional treatment. Did they try to treat it at all that late on or not?
Yes, well, I did get the perfunctory dose of 200 milligrams of doxycycline for 30 days.
Right.
And that really, it was like taking candy for me.
Right.
And then they repeated it a second time, and then I had this array of symptoms that just kept changing, and then new symptoms would crop up, and so it had not helped. And by the time things were really dire, I did see not just a general practitioner, but one of the leading Lyme doctors in the country, and he put me on in what I call industrial strength antibiotics of 1,500 milligrams per day, and in a pulsed cycle. And you feel dreadful while you're taking them because of that Herxheimer reaction, where the spirochetes are dying off in the body, and you feel generally even more miserable than before. So I thought, aha, this is working. But then it didn't last, and then things would get worse. And so it became apparent that antibiotics, which are the gold standard for Lyme treatment, were not able to help me. And that's quite typical for someone whose case has become what they call late stage neurological, because it really affected my brain at that point too.
Wow. In what way? What were some of the symptoms of that?
Well, it was very apparent to me, Brian, because as a professor, I really couldn't think anymore. I would start an idea, I couldn't finish it. I didn't know how I had started. I completely lost my memory. I couldn't tell you what I wrote my dissertation on. I would forget things. I would be driving and I didn't know where I was or where I was going. It came to the point where I really couldn't drive any longer, also because of the pain I had in my hands and my joints that were really affected. But the I would say intense brain fog, just a muddled thinking, really, really unable to focus on anything. But apart from these Lyme migraines that prevented me from reading or writing anyway, it just looked like words were dancing on the page. I couldn't really read during this whole period. So my brain was terribly affected.
Wow. And were you physically affected as well in terms of your movement? And
I had tremendous pain in my joints. I had these Lyme headaches, and as the years went by, this went on until the summer of 2017.
wow.
I developed even more alarming symptoms, and at that point, for most of 2017, I had to be bedridden, and I would have these night sweats and tachycardia, and it just sounded like my heart was just taking things into its own hands and
Oh,
beating randomly and wildly, and
oh,
tinnitus in my ears, and then it was just a total breakdown, and chronic fatigue. And I would rest and rest and rest, because at that point I had to quit my job as a professor. So I was able to rest full time, and I kept thinking, well, I'm doing all this resting, I'm surely going to get
mm,
better.
mm.
And by that time I had tried every alternative methodology imaginable. The list is long and
Okay.
exhaustive.
Well, let's talk about a few of those, because so I mean you're not entirely sure when the initial infection took hold, but we're thinking maybe 2010, maybe.
It is
And
probably likely that, based on the symptoms that
yeah,
started to
and
develop.
you, I mean, I don't know how successful early antibiotic therapy is, but I believe it is quite successful, but usually within the first month or so of that initial infection. Of course, you were like 2 years on before you even had a positive diagnosis.
That's right.
So that
Yes.
was way too late, way too late.
In
And
my case, it was way too late.
yeah, so what about some of these alternatives you did try, and did they have any positive effect?
So I first, I went to see a naturopath. I tried multiple herbal supplements, and there are well-known Lyme protocols with using herbal supplements. And I was taking a mountain of these supplements every day.
Right.
I tried, the Rife machine that
Oh,
has those electronic
yeah.
pulses, and the far infrared sauna, the biomats, all sorts of different treatments of that nature. Even some things with Chinese medicine and Ayurveda,
Mm,
and it really, I sometimes it alleviated my pain, and sometimes I could sleep better, because there was also the Lyme insomnia, which is a known symptom of Lyme, but it never took my pain away. It would sometimes alleviate it or allow me to just tolerate it,
oh,
but it wasn't making it better.
no, and not even a slight shift in improvement for a few days. It was just wasn't doing anything at all.
Well, at times, Brian, I would have these mysterious reprieves here and there, but not necessarily related to what I was taking. They were
Ah,
really random, that I
right,
would wake up and feel like, I could do something.
right,
But I didn't know how long that was going to last, when it would come, when it would go. And it didn't seem to correspond to these treatments that I was taking. It
right,
was very random and unreliable altogether.
right.
It was hard to tell.
I mean, so I looked at the sort of our own National Health Service website about the disease, and it says for only a very, very small minority of people are these symptoms, as you've described, that severe. Is that a fair comment? And if so, is it because of the genetic makeup you have that you suffered so badly, do you think?
That's a very tough question to answer, Brian. And I think the statistics are, still being worked on a great deal. I don't know about the UK, but for the US, that is certainly true. My my doctor, Dr. Stephen Phillips, my Lyme doctor, wrote a recent book called Chronic, and there are more out there than one would think, it looks like, but the exact number, it's difficult to determine, also because so many people have given up on treatment altogether, so it's harder to track them. But I think it's a larger number than one would think,
Right,
um,
right.
actually.
And I think that if it's never diagnosed, people suffering from what they think is ME, chronic fatigue, could actually be Lyme. I mean, that's
That's
possible, isn't it?
absolutely right. Yes,
Yeah,
it appears that there are many cases out there that it's just misdiagnosed, but it is really late stage Lyme disease, and it does make one arthritic. Chronic fatigue is a major symptom for late stage Lyme. So
right.
and then in my case, I had also developed the autoimmune disorder of psoriasis, because my immune system was fighting so hard all of the time that it just all of a sudden it was open season on my body.
Wow. How awful for you. And you must have been in utter despair because thinking, well, what's the way out of this? Is this going to be my life?
I was, Brian. Yes, I was in utter despair because, I'd always been so high functioning as a professor, and I ran marathons and I went hiking all over the world, and I played musical instruments, and all of a sudden I had nothing to give to anyone. And so I was absolutely in despair, but always determined as a researcher and an optimistic person to find a solution. So I was always hunting for a solution for myself, and decided that I was going to have to become my own head doctor, because this new normal was absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah. So having exhausted most of the known avenues, you discover this extraordinary therapy, which is practiced mainly in Russia, I believe, called dry fasting. Now, how did you, until I read your book, I'd never heard of it. And so how did you come by it?
Well, I believe you, Brian. It's not well known, and some of the information, if one does Google it out there, is spurious, and so it's hard to educate oneself about it. But yes, I came across it because I was looking for last ditch options at that point, and I was really on a forum for patients with autoimmune disorders looking for a solution, and I read this quote, and I could only do a tiny bit at a time because I was confined to my bed, and even looking at my phone was painful, so I couldn't really delve into it the way that I wanted to. But I read this quote from this Siberian MD about how this dry fasting incinerated diseased cells and tissues. And I thought, well, that's precisely what I need to do. This sounds fascinating to me. And having known about, the science of autophagy, or self-eating, or, eating the diseased tissues of one's own body, I thought, well, this even seems like it could be scientifically logical. So that's what drew me to find this doctor, and that was not easy either, because he only speaks Russian. His website was in Russian, so I had a whole journey to even get to him, but I was able to do that, and he's far more accessible now, and does have a translator, and he has a website, and that's accessible in English too. So that's what I
understand you had a bit of an advantage because your husband's Russian.
That's right.
So that helped a bit, didn't it? So you could get the translation right. But I mean, nonetheless, it was still quite a punt for you, because as I understand it, because you went eventually to Siberia to meet up with Sergei Filanov.
That's right.
And who had never treated Lyme disease with dry fasting before. So for you, that was quite a gamble too, wasn't it? And just before we go on to talk about your adventures in Siberia, just explain to everyone what dry fasting actually is.
Yes. So, Brian, for your listeners, dry fasting is when one abstains from intaking both food and water for a period of days, consecutive cumulative days. And in addition to that abstemiousness, one also refrains from making external contact with water or creams, lotion. So there's no brushing the teeth, there are no showers, there's no lip balm, no hand lotion. So dry fasting is an absolute form of fasting when the body is not taking in anything whatsoever. And that enables the body to go into this sophisticated process of eliminating diseased cells and, recycling cellular debris.
Right. So let's get back to your particular story and Dr. Filanov, and presumably you got in touch with him, and I understand he said, get out to Siberia as quickly as possible, because I think it was towards the end days of summer. And
That's
if you
right.
didn't, that was not going to be possible anytime after that. So you pretty much, I mean, in a matter of days, it sounds like, made the decision, packed your bags, and off you went, really.
It took a little bit longer than that just to get the appropriate visa and everything
Oh,
that I
right,
needed.
right.
And he did want me to start the protocol. So as I know we'll discuss, you don't just jump into this dry fasting. So he
Right.
had a particular protocol that he wanted me to follow before my arrival. So
Okay.
but I did the preparations, and I could not travel alone at that point whatsoever. It was out of the question for me to try to travel to Siberia. So yes, my husband traveled with me there to
Yeah.
just escort me and drop me off. And of course, it was very helpful to have a Russian speaker. But I would say that now, given the world situation, Dr. Filonov does conduct fasts in places like Montenegro and Turkey that are far more accessible for everyone else in the world.
And a bit warmer.
Right.
And so tell me a little bit about the preparations before you went to Siberia. What were some of the things he asked you to do?
Yes, he asked me to go off all of my medications and supplements. And instead, he wanted me to take activated charcoal, every day. And then also baking soda in water is a sort of a detoxifier. There is something else he uses, it's called polyabsorbent, but at that time it wasn't available. It sort of draws poisons out of the body. So, and then he wanted to check in on my diet. I didn't have any tweaking to do on my diet because I've been largely plant-based since I was a child, low glycemic. And so I reduced portions, and I was exclusively on the plant-based, but also no coffee. And normally I would say I understand with no coffee, but a person who is very tired with Lyme, just the tiny little jolt was helpful in the morning. But I abstained from that. So all substances that would be considered stimulants. And then the protocol involved me doing a 1-day dry fast and then a 3-day dry fast prior to my arrival in Siberia.
Right. And the optimum diet is plant-based, is it? So if you were a carnivore, for example, he would say abstain from meat, would he? Or
he would say that in the preparation for the dry fast. He doesn't recommend that for everyone is a maintenance forever, and it's very personalized according to the person. But also wild caught fish could be okay for some people. And I know in his exit plan coming out of the fasts, and wild caught fish is very accessible where he is in Siberia. After a week or so, fish is included. They make fish soup and such for the patients. So that is included.
so and also you did some dry fasting at home. You said how long? 1 day and 3 days?
I did a 1 day, and I don't recommend this, but when I found him initially, I decided no one was home and I was by myself anyway. I was just going to try it on the spot. So I did that, and I thought I could feel no worse than I do having Lyme disease every day.
Right.
So, I did that, and then, I did follow his proper protocol. And what I will say is that the 1 day and the 3 day, when the body has never done it before, are far harder than the 7 day and 9 day that I went on to do in Siberia with him.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because the body isn't used to it.
To suddenly take water away from, I mean, people fast, but they'll do a juice fast or a water fast. But to remove all liquids is I can imagine is quite something for the body to adapt to. So how long was this protocol followed before you went to Siberia?
Well, I had a few weeks before I went, before I could get my paperwork in order. I think my passport was also expiring. So it did take a little bit of time to, he did say come immediately, but I couldn't quite,
you had
pull
to
that off.
get through the red tape first. Okay.
Right.
So you finally get out there, and by which time, when it was towards the end of August or whenever, is it? So
That's
the
right.
summer is fast receding in Siberia. But you didn't start with dry fasting when you got there. He had a few things he did first, didn't he?
Well, I was there for a good few days before I started. He's all about taking time, settling in, not
Right.
rushing, making sure I was adapted to, the atmosphere and the climate and such. So I was there for a short while before I did start the first dry fast, which ended up being 7 days.
Right. That was your first fast in Siberia.
That's right.
That was 7 days, which is optimum, I believe, is 9 days. Is that right?
Yes, for the maximum, for a medical dry fast to really accomplish killing off a disease, and he's been treating patients with all sorts of illnesses for 30 years with us, 9 days and 9 nights is the magical number. And the important thing is to keep it through consecutive. You can't just take a break from dry fasting and go back to it. The body has to take that amount of time to really work up to getting that deep into the cellular level.
Right. But you were doing other things too, like meditation, I believe, and of course
I've been meditating most of my life, Brian, and I found that I just went into this, and I still do. You feel very naturally meditative when you're dry fasting. So for me, it was very peaceful to dry fast and meditate at the same time.
Okay, so that was more your idea rather than his, was it, to meditate? Or
well, he is supportive of meditation, and he's told me that he's now written, extensively on the role of meditation and dry fasting from witnessing me doing that. But it was, I just naturally meditate. That's what I do every day. So it was just natural for me to meditate and dry fast.
That's interesting. So the pupil was also the teacher. That's good. That's interesting. Okay, so you did the initial 7-day fast with him, and then was there a break? Did he break that fast somehow?
Yes, that's right. And the exit, he always says that the exit is almost more important than the fast itself. And it's very different from intermittent fasting, but you see, some intermittent fasters who then gobble all sorts of things after the intermittent fast is over. With the dry fast, he calls it natural surgery. So you have to be very mindful about what you put into your body afterwards. And so he would start me with, say, a day of hot water, just hot water. And because the body is sort of heated up internally, no cold water. So it's all like tea temperature water. And then very slowly.
Is that because it would be a shock to the system?
It would be a shock to the system. So he's very careful. But you see people walking around with their thermoses of hot water after they've broken their dry fasts there. And then he doesn't do citrus, that it tends to produce nausea. But a simple piece of fruit, very small quantities. And then, because it is Russia, a small bowl of this like buckwheat kasha porridge that is very typical, or a shredded cabbage salad, something like that, but very small portions.
Okay, so this is a 7-day fast. Were you feeling better at all after that?
I was feeling phenomenal after the 7-day fast. I felt, after even the 7-day fast, I felt better than I had in years, and just sort of happy and light and energetic. What was most notable for me when I was finally allowed to take my shower, which is really a banya there, it's not a proper shower, it's pouring hot water over yourself in this sort of sauna-like room. But I noticed that all of these reptilian patches of skin from the psoriasis had completely disappeared. They were up and down my arms, and it was like I had baby skin. I just broke down crying in the banya, and they have never come back. So that was the most tangible result there. And I had sinus congestion with the Lyme, which is also a typical symptom. That was all cleared up, and my energy levels were up. But and so he gave me, I think it was a couple of weeks or so to rehydrate and recover before we went into the 9-day dry fast.
Right. Okay. So, but you're eating these little minimal things during that period, and then you went for the 9-day.
Right. That was the plan.
And I mean, 7-day, 9-day, not an enormous difference, but he does really sort of impress upon people the importance of 9 days over 7 days, doesn't he? And I'm sure there's a good science behind that, which we'll maybe touch upon in a minute. So then you embarked on the 9-day fast, and I'm sure you felt, well, those are going to be too bad after doing 7. And did you have any difficulties in doing this?
So, like I said, I felt significant thirst during the 24-hour and during the 3-day. Yeah. During the 7-day, my body had really started to adapt to it. Right. And it was almost like, oh, this is what we're doing. And so, I wasn't hungry. I really didn't experience thirst. I did have, if I talked too much, he recommends that you really don't talk a lot, but people would want to ask me how I was doing. And if I overdid it, I would feel like I had a dry mouth that went sort of down into the back of my throat. That was uncomfortable. And sometimes, in the 7-day, I would have like an early headache, but then it left right away. Or you just, you do feel like you want to rest. It is a restful, restorative thing. But by the 9-day, I think my body was also so much cleaner, and it was also processing all of these antibiotics and various, drugs I had taken for so long that my liver was getting clean, and all of that discomfort was completely gone by this 9-day. So that the 9-day, I just felt peaceful, and I would sort of lie on my yoga mat and do my meditation and read Rumi, and I just felt like this is actually marvelous. Right.
And of course, you'd been through the 7-day and started to see remarkable recoveries in yourself. So the idea of doing this, you must have went into it with great hope that this really was going to be the road to recovery.
I really did. And he was very convincing about saying that the 9th day and night are the most important, because that's getting into the deep cellular level where, you've burned off, whatever it is that's left in your body, and then it's really able to get to the point where it is incinerating the diseased cells and tissue. So that's his, I think from his experience of conducting these for 30 years, he's noticed that that's the magical time period needed to kill off disease.
Okay, and you were his first Lyme patient, but I think before that he was dealing with a lot of autoimmune disorders, arthritis and the like. But you were the first Lyme patient. But I suppose he felt, well, there are similarities here. Maybe this will also work.
Yes, absolutely. And he felt so convinced that having worked with patients with autoimmune and chronic fatigue and arthritis, those symptoms were similar to what I experienced.
Yeah.
That it would have tremendous benefits for me.
Were you feeling remarkably different and better, or?
Yes, I absolutely was, because my energy levels were sky high. Of course, not the day. The day you come out of a 9-day dry fast, Brian, you don't feel like bouncing. You have to, a major part of the work inside the body is happening when you break the fast and you start drinking the hot water, and it's carrying all of that debris out of you. And you feel actually like you really need to rest deeply.
And does he recommend drinking a lot of water at the end of the fast or not?
Never a lot, always in moderation. I mean, he'll say to take 10 minutes for the first sip, which I think is quite hard for people to achieve who haven't had water for 9 days. But he says to, really take your time with it. But, to drink as needed. And so for me, I would take 2 full days after the 9-day dry fast to just have hot water before I put any food in my body. And then you go into a very deep sleep. I mean, you sleep for almost 24 hours and your body is just recovering. That's when, it's building new white blood cells. It's really renewing itself. So it's when you break the dry fast, it's really a time of rest. And, he doesn't want you to sleep outside in your sleeping bag anymore. He wants you to be all warm and cozy inside and rest up. So
well, that's the point we should just mention, Michelle. I don't think we did. You during the fast, you're sleeping outside.
I was, just because he recommended that just being in the natural air outdoors where there was dew in the air, it was just healthier to breathe in the natural air than being in some of the dachas or cabins. They had fires going and that dries out the air. And so I took it very seriously and I wanted to be all in. So I had my sleeping bag outside. It was actually lovely to look up at the Siberian night sky.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. You wanted your life back, so I mean I can understand why you'd be fully committed to this. So you ended the fast and you started drinking some hot water. Thereafter, you started to eat solids again?
Yes, he likes to start after the 9-day dry fast with watermelon, which is perfect in Siberia where he is. There are a lot of watermelon in the end of the summer. So he thinks it's just very hydrating to have the watermelon. So I would have some watermelon, and then again, the other things that we mentioned. And I was in Siberia for another few weeks after that. So there are sorts of liver massages and other things that they do to facilitate helping all of these things leave the body. So that was part of it. And then after the exit, by the time I went back to New York, I was really feeling like I was 17 again. I mean, I just felt like I was bouncing.
Oh, how wonderful. How wonderful. But he says it's not the end of the story for you. He still wants you to do occasional fast once you are back home as well. Is that right?
That's right. He wanted me to do, because my case was so serious, he wanted me to do an additional 9-day dry fast at home alone. Wow. Now, I never recommend that anyone just take this dry fasting upon themselves. I write out the protocol very carefully in my book, Starving to Heal in Siberia. And I also recommend consulting with him. He's very accessible on the Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by that time, I'd already done 2 long ones. And once the body is acclimated and he can determine that you tolerate it well, then it was perfectly safe for me to conduct the 3rd long dry fast in the US. So I did do that.
And that was the last fast you've ever done?
Oh, no.
You carry on doing it?
So he recommends that everyone dry fast, even if you don't have any sort of illness. Just he argues that it wards off any kind of spurious cells growing in the body, wards off cancer. He thinks that it wards off Alzheimer's by avoiding any buildup of the amyloid plaque, etc. And just for immune system building. And so I haven't had a single symptom of Lyme for 5 years, and I have been incredibly well. I mean, I run every day, I go hiking, I go skiing again. I've been riding like a fiend in the last 5 years. So that's very exciting because I never knew I would get my brain back. That was the most exciting thing in some sense for someone like me, who's a scholar, not to be able to use my brain. So to get that back. But I do dry fast 1 day a week regularly. In fact, I'm dry fasting today. Okay. This is a dry fasting day. And then I do a longer one once a year, but not to ward off Lyme or anything like that, just for what he calls immune system maintenance. I think he does it himself. So it's sort of for anyone to do.
Right. Okay. And for anyone watching and listening to this, I mean, it is extreme. And as you say, they shouldn't do this without proper supervision, ideally from him, or I don't know how many other dry fasting specialists there are around, to be honest with you. There probably are a few in Russia, but to do it under supervision is important. But tell me, what are some of the sort of takeaway therapies, simple therapies that people could bring into their lives without necessarily going that far?
Well, if you're talking about a shorter dry fast, I think the ones that I did initially, say a 36-hour or a 2-day, something like that.
Right.
If it's done properly, then that's perfectly fine to do at home. And he really is the only world's leading expert MD on dry fasting,
Okay.
who
Okay.
I think is reliable to go to.
Okay.
I would never recommend that anyone take on an extended dry fast at home without consulting with
Right.
him and following the proper protocol. That's really important, and I emphasize that over and over again in my book. But if one were to do a simple 24-hour day dry fast, he always recommends doing water fasting before dry fasting. I had always been juice fasting. I did my first juice fast, I think, when I was 17. It's just something I used to like to do, not because I was sick. So he would recommend, reducing your portions and doing the activated charcoal, and it's all in my book in the protocol there. And I think there's a portion of it on your website that
it's an essential read for everyone, and I'll be telling them about it just towards the end there. But what is actually going on biologically with dry fasting?
So, as I said, it's the principle of autophagy, or the idea of self-eating. So, if the body is deprived of an external power supply, such as food or water, then it is able to start this process of preserving the healthy cells, but working to break down and decompose other cells. So if it's not always working to process the food and the water that are coming in, then it starts to work on itself. So it's very much in our DNA to do this.
That's very interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of research into fasting anyway. I mean, all the religions do it anyway, or recommend.
That's right.
And you have people like Vaclav Longo at University of California, who's done a lot of work on fasting, not dry fasting, but fasting, who's actually seen remarkable turnarounds even after 3 days with, conditions like cancer. So
that's
really,
right. The fasting mimicking diet, that's really just reduced
calorie. Yeah, well, he does calorie reduction always. But I guess they're all helpful, aren't they? It's better than doing nothing at all. So I suppose it's a matter of degree, I guess, that fasting fundamentally is good for the body, that maybe it's what all of us should be doing every so often.
Right.
And as you incorporate in your own life now. And I must say one thing, so reading a bit about the doctor, I mean, I really come across as a very honorable and honest man, because his fees were very low, weren't they? He wasn't charging an awful lot of money for any of this work. I mean, it was $50 a day or something.
That's
I can't remember.
right, Brian. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
and I was very honored. I find that, yes, very honorable that he wants to be accessible, that he doesn't want to have to turn anyone away because they can't afford treatments.
Wow.
And after having gone through, and I'm so sympathetic to all of those out there who have paid significant sums out of pocket, as I did too. So it is very welcome to know that he is definitely not out to take advantage of anyone.
He's not. He's a very honourable man, I must say, and there's great integrity in the work that he's trying to do, I think. And we can't say that of everyone in this field, but he certainly is one of them. I think that is true to say.
Right.
I think it's quite astonishing. Yeah, he does just talk about the incinerators, doesn't he? The idea that fasting puts coals on the body's incinerator that burns these things, and in a way that the body just needs that help. The immune system needs that help every so often, I guess, is essentially what he says. And it seems to be a necessary thing to do. And it was very interesting. His observation was, he said that inflammation can't exist without water. And the research that we've done at What Doctors is really points back to inflammation being such a problem with so many diseases, including some cancers even. Inflammations and heart disease, I believe, is an inflammatory problem. Arthritis clearly is. And maybe there's an inflammatory response as part of Lyme disease.
Absolutely, there is.
Yeah, and so without the water, the inflammatory response can't continue, essentially. So he's saying that's one of the keys to dry fasting that ordinary fasting can't do, and it is absolutely fascinating. Molly, do we have questions from any viewers today?
Yes, we do indeed.
Okay.
A couple of questions about the dangers of fasting, obviously without water, and the effects of dehydration. And obviously dehydration can be quite fatal. So they just a couple of questions on that.
Is it a good one, Michelle?
Yes, of course, because there are these fears around dry fasting, and we've all heard that the body can't live if it doesn't have water for 3 days. So that's the point of adapting to this methodology, because as I've said, I've seen hundreds of his patients walking around after 9 days, and they're thriving and doing quite well. And so it's a different sort of dehydration if you work your body up to it, so you ease into the cumulative days. But since we're comprised of at least 70% water, and we're just talking about inflammation, he calls sometimes when we have inflammation in the body, then the eternal water that we have is sort of, he calls it swampy water, just for the layperson. And so because the body already has those reserves of water, it goes into this process of conserving and then getting rid of what is not healthy. So it actually knows what to do, which is why I kept thinking while I was dry fasting, the body is the doctor, the body is the doctor. So it actually knows what to do. Okay. But to like I said, to jump into an extended dry fast without having ever done it would absolutely be very dangerous. So that's why you do the incremental 24-hour and then the 3-day. And then he even does a 5-day for people who have done a 1 or a 3 too. So that would be my answer.
And also the other things that he asked you to do before coming to Siberia too, I'm sure were pretty key as part of that process.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't want to also, have a large meal with animal products and drink a bunch of wine and then say, oh, I'm going to dry fast, and you'd be absolutely miserable.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Molly, another question?
Yeah. So it's, why did you do a 7-day fast first if the 9 days is best?
Because it's the exact same principle that we were just discussing, that you train for the 9-day dry fast like a marathon runner trains for a marathon. So it's not shocking the body. So it's incrementally training up to it. So that makes the 7-day dry fast very important.
Okay.
Perfect.
Another one?
Another question. Did you have to do any sort of mental preparation before, other than meditation, for the longest dry fast?
I would say that I did try to prepare myself. I kept saying I came up with my own formula that the mind was going to be at rest, the body would be the doctor, and then while I meditated, spirit would hold space. So I absolutely did prepare myself. And I think that mental preparation is important, just like you would if you're going into a big test or a big project or a marathon itself. So I'm just cultivating your own inner resilience is helpful.
Okay.
Perfect. Another one saying, would it help people who already have Alzheimer's rather than just being a means of warding it off?
I'm sorry, Molly, I didn't hear. Would it help people who
already have Alzheimer's rather than just
Alzheimer's? I know he has talked about it as a preventative treatment of Alzheimer's. I think that he's also talked about early onset and beginning symptoms of cognitive decline, that it would be helpful in that regard. If it was late stage Alzheimer's, I think that would be trickier. Of course, that would be something I would want to ask him directly. But I think early stages could have good possibilities, and I would never want to speak on his behalf, but being in such close contact with him, I have heard him speak of that before.
Okay.
And also, how quickly did you notice a difference in sort of your worst Lyme disease symptoms?
Well, actually, it was while I was on the 7-day dry fast that it was astonishing to me that without having any food or water in my body, I was actually feeling better as the days went by. You know, he wanted me to walk, and I thought, how can I possibly walk? But it seemed as if, you know, as my body was burning things off, I was able to walk, and I was able to do things I hadn't been able to do before. And I would say that really by the end of the 7-day, the tremendous pain in my joints had greatly subsided, and some of the alarming symptoms that never came back during the dry fast of the 9 days or longer, you know, the tachycardia, all of that seemed to really diminish greatly by the time I was, you know, nearly through with the 7-day.
Perfect. And I think you sort of touched upon this, but someone's asked, is it really bad for the kidneys, the longest fasting?
So Dr. Filunov says that the organs sort of go on vacation and the kidneys actually take a rest. So if they're not constantly at work to filter what's incoming, then they have very little to do during this time. So that he has shown over and over again that there is no damage to the kidneys. And he has been guiding patients through these medical fasts, like I've said, for 30 years, and has never had any issues of that nature.
Great. And Janet's asked, are you confident that this is a permanent cure for your Lyme disease?
Oh, I absolutely am. To be 5 years in and to, have superhuman energy all of the time, and to, have gotten, my brain back, and to be out running, and, I've been able to have a child. So I'm, out skiing and hiking with a child on my back, or now with the child. So yes, I absolutely am 100% convinced that I am permanently disease-free, at least with the Lyme disease.
Great. And I think a final question from the attendees is, how do you explain that no one in the Western world is using this therapy?
Well, I have shared it. It's a very good question. I have shared copies of the book with some people in medical communities here. I think, the mythology around being without water is compelling and hard to overcome. One doctor to whom I sent the book, Dr. Neil Nathan, who gave me permission to use his comments, and he's written a book called Toxic, and he treats a lot of Lyme patients. He was so impressed with it that he himself went out and started dry fasting and following my protocol. So I think it may be coming. It's just, I think that there hasn't been access to it. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book and include the very careful protocol that I worked on with Dr. Filonov to be able to share with the reader as a first foray into bringing it to the West.
Okay. Molly, any final question?
Yeah, we've had a couple just in then.
Okay.
How many weeks did you do in total in Siberia?
So I spent 2 months in Siberia and just did those, 2 longer, the 7-day and the 9-day. But there's, the rehabilitation period in between. And just for the immune system maintenance, which really I don't think that I need, I just do it now as a matter of principle. I did go back the following year and did another dry fast with him.
Okay.
Great. And one more. What about those on medication, which without water or food even, I mean, they can't survive if they're having to take the medication?
So you can't take any medication while you're dry fasting. And I certainly am not a medical doctor and would never recommend that anyone stop their medication without consulting with a doctor. But on his website, filonov.net, he does have, the option of signing up for a consultation. And, I know there are differences in medications, if it's something, necessary to keep, diabetes medication or something, I think, that would be a case-by-case basis to discuss, directly with a doctor, but absolutely no medications while you're dry fasting, because, you'd be undoing the whole principle of not putting an external power supply in the body. So he does work with patients with, medication reduction and seeing how necessary the medication is for the patient. So that's absolutely an important question.
Could you just give us a quick idea of some of the diseases that he has treated?
He has treated several cancer patients, rheumatoid arthritis, patients with fertility issues, autoimmune disorders. He's now had many late-stage Lyme patients come, because I first wrote a blog and many American patients saw the blog, and then all of a sudden there were quite a few coming to see him. So that there, I know he's seen some heart disease patients. I think it's really a wide range of conditions that he has treated.
Has he had papers published about his work?
So he has published extensively in Russian, and now you can find in English on, say, Amazon. Some of his books have been translated, and more. I think he has an Italian translator who has translated some of his books into English. So I would say that if you're looking for a legitimate source, then his books would be the ones to go.
Okay, cool. The first place to start is obviously the November issue of What Doctors. On our website, we give a snapshot, and that's all it is, of Michel's work and the work of Dr. Filonov. Thereafter, you've got to read Michel's wonderful book itself, Starving to Heal in Siberia, which is a Greenleaf Book Group publication. I guess available on Amazon, Michel?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And do you in that book give further contact details of, well, what do people do after that? So they've read the book, they've read our magazine. Where do they go from there?
Yes, I do include Dr. Filonov's contact information in the book itself.
Okay.
And, as I said, he is conducting fasting retreats that one does have to prepare for in places like Montenegro and Turkey. And he's expressed interest in wanting me to come and lead a retreat with him, and I would lead the meditations and, talk more about my book and be an English-speaking person on site. So we may do that in the spring or summer, but he runs them regularly. And so that, that would absolutely be another resource.
Right. And of course, as they say at the end of every good program, don't try this at home, certainly not without supervision. But it seems to me something very profound here, and something that we in the West have missed. And I think it is this instinctive fear of going without water, I think, says Brian, sipping water. And I think that probably is what halts us and makes us think, well, is this really safe? And I think it's a case of almost just going and doing this, and even going without medication or reducing your medication, because when you do, it seems it creates profound changes in the body, including the lessening of pain and all sorts of things. The fact that you were virtually bedridden and here you are, is testament really to the wonders of this technique.
Oh, it is. And just, I mean, I have phenomenal energy levels, and you know, I mean, I've wasn't sick for years. My daughter and I had COVID skiing, and we had no idea that we did until we had to take a test to get on a flight. And we were just bouncing around the woods with no symptoms. So the fact that, you know, my immune system is flying all of the time, and I, you know, and that I am able to, you know, run every day and hike and ski and then write all of these things. I don't have to take naps. You know, I could try to do a variety of things and I would just fall flat on my face after, you know, not very long. So yes, it's very powerful, and I'm happy to share it with everyone.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing it to us, Michelle. It's an extraordinary story, and I think a very, very important one as well. And the fact that it touches on many conditions. I know the entry point for this was Lyme, but it actually does improve many, many autoimmune problems. And I think it's a very profound and important contribution to therapy. I really do. I think it's so important. But as I say, under supervision, I think there's no doubt. So let me just quickly reiterate, Michelle's wonderful book is Starving to Heal in Siberia, available on Amazon. It's a Greenleaf Book Group production. And it's an absolute must read as you delve deeper into this very profound subject. Michelle, thank you so much for, I really appreciate that and the time. I think it's been so interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Not at all. I hope to have you back again. I'd love to have you back as you develop more work with Dr. Finlow. You mentioned his own website. Could you just mention that again?
Yes, his website is filonov.net, FILONOV.net.
Thank you for that. Thank you again so much, Michelle. Thank you everyone for watching. I know it's been recorded, so if you don't catch it, you'll see it again. It's going to be recorded, so there's a lot of information here. You probably do want to see it again. And thank you all for turning up today and watching this. And thank you once again, Michelle. And thank you, Molly, for bringing an excellent fielder of questions.